Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the January 11th, 2022 meeting of the Milton Conservation Commission. The commission members are appointed by the Select Board, and our duties and responsibilities are to implement the rules and regulations of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Milton Town Bylaw. As a matter of formality, the commissioners will introduce themselves. My name is John Kiernan. Steve, would you introduce yourself as well?
Sure, Steve, Conservation Agent. Steve Ivas, sorry.
Arthur Doyle, a member.
Todd, you're on mute. I could see you trying to talk, but you're still muted.
Unmuted.
Perfect.
Todd Hamilton,
Thank you.
member.
Hans Fenlingen.
Ingrid,
Katie.
there you are. All right, I think we're ready to go. And I should say right up front that we welcome comments, the participation by the public. We ask that you ask whatever questions you have and make whatever comments you deem appropriate. But I do ask that you introduce yourselves for the record. First on the agenda tonight is an informational item. This is 1465 Brush Hill Road. This is from the Norfolk County Mosquito Control District. Do we have a representative for the Mosquito Control District?
That would be me, Caroline Havland. I'm the field operations manager for the district. We are working on doing a fairly simple excavation of the small man-made pond located on the Wakefield Estates property. And I could do my best to field questions. I can't promise that I'll have the answers to everything tonight, but I'm happy to follow up with anybody if I can't answer your questions tonight. I haven't been in my office, so I apologize. I do have some materials that might be helpful. As I understand.
Can we just get the public oriented as to where the Wakefield Estate is? We know, but the public perhaps does not.
Okay.
Hopefully you can see the screen right now.
Yeah.
So this line here is Route 138. Here, Blue Hill Ave. This is the Thatcher Montessori School here. There's a sedimentation basin right here that's put in by the Mass DOT back about probably 25 years ago. This round thing right here. And if we went further north on the screen, up on the screen, we'd come right to Brush Hill Road. Okay, it's right around, literally right around the corner. If that helps people understand where we are.
That's great. Thanks, Steve. Caroline, thank you very much for the pause, but go ahead and tell us what you plan to do.
Oh, thank you. Well, for the last several mosquito seasons, we've been working with Erica Max. Had pretty severe outbreaks of mosquitoes, localized adult mosquitoes. We've been setting traps. It's pretty unbearable, not just for people, but for the animals there. And there are times, and I know Erica, as the manager, tries not to employ, chemical treatment, but it has come down to that when there really is no other alternative. So we've been trying to locate the sources within the property, and we've sent out personnel over the last few seasons locating some localized areas where we have some flooding that we can fix somewhat by hand cleaning the already previously existing channels within the property. There's also an area that's undergoing some erosion, and that material has ended up in this small pond. So the intent, and it actually is conducive to larval mosquito development now. So we are going to go in and not a ton of material, probably about 3 to 4 cubic yards is my best estimation from the small amount of field work I've done within the pond area. And we are going to use our Bobcat to move that to an upland area within. And we still have to review with Erica and her botanist exact location for that. We'll do that in the field, but we are not going to be filling wetlands. That's certainly not our intent. That's not what we do at Norfolk County Mosquito Control. We, in turn, when we're out there, the ditches that are notated on there in the blue, the channel markers, will hand clean, literally using rakes, manpower. We are going to continue to work upstream. Um, One of the questions I had for you all tonight was to get that history on the cistern and find out what's going on with it, if there's any kind of maintenance, and what's, it seems like it's being affected upstream, and we would like to work with Erica on making sure that this, you know, doesn't continue to happen. We won't have to go in there and maintain it again. And we'd like to help stabilize the bank that's getting eroded. Fortunately, there's a lot of natural material that's existing on the site that can kind of be moved to shore up the banks. Right now, it's a really shady area. So I don't think it would be very helpful to plant or seed unless there's some thinning of the trees and sunlight can reach that. That was something she was, talking to about some of the other people in her realm. But anything I can find out about the cistern, Steve, you seem to have some information, and if any contacts, that would be great. I've only seen part of the ditch that leads out of it. I did reach out to the Montessori school since it is their property, but I hadn't made contact yet. They hadn't gotten back to me. And I know it's been a very busy year for them as well. So I probably wasn't on their in their sites yet.
A little bit of information for you, Eric. I think I was present at a Conservation Commission meeting many, many years ago, John, where you folks allowed um, this round, you call it a cistern, I call it maybe a soil, it's sort of like a, what's the first?
You said sediment
Yeah,
containment.
it's for sediment removal. What do you call the first thing in a basin?
Detention,
Sump?
detention?
Yeah, in a detention.
Orbay?
Thank you very much, whoever that was. My brain is not working again. It's the COVID. That's my.
I understand fully.
But what they did was, it was the DOT that actually created that. It cost them, I think, like $100,000 30 years ago, which is a lot of money. We're all surprised about how much money, and that stuck into my head. But they were supposed to have cleaned it once every so many years, and I don't believe it's ever been cleaned, because if you look at it today, it's nothing but Phragmites, a common reed,
Right.
that's growing inside it. I looked at it probably within the last 6 months, saying, my goodness, this needs some attention. So, is it District 5 or District 6? We need to talk to about that. It's not the Montessori schools issue, by the way.
Right.
Just to keep everything clear. It's not their issue at all. They were allowed to put it there. And in fact, Polly Wakefield was alive at the time, and she wanted to make sure that it got cleaned for obvious purposes, because she saw the future. She saw exactly what's happening right now. It's pretty amazing.
Steve, I don't have a particular memory. I mean, I have a clear memory of being there and approving the permit application to install it. But those are the days of Don Neal, and he was very careful about things like O&M plans. And I'm sure that there is an O&M plan that would have accompanied that order of conditions. And again, it's probably, I think you're right, it's probably 25 years ago. But I have a distinct memory of being there and dotting I's and crossing T's. And under his leadership, he was very good at O&M plans. So I think we could take a look at the file, and then we could call, whether it's District 5 or District 6, and remind them politely that it may be appropriate to clean it out.
Capital idea, John. Shall do.
Okay.
So that helps you, Caroline, okay, in terms of understanding.
Immensely, yes. I didn't want to go wandering around next to the schoolyard either without reaching out to to the school. But I did gather enough information from Erica that it was related to either, I think she thought it was actually the DOC rather than the DOT. So that's where the hangup was, because I had reached out to some other folks. So it makes a lot more sense now.
Sure.
You know,
And I'm,
Carolyn, you might be right. I mean, if you had asked me before Steve spoke, I would have said DCR. But
okay.
if it may be DOT, that one, I don't have a clear memory of.
I'm pretty sure it was DOT because I was involved very peripherally because I was in the Blue Hills Reservation at the time.
Okay,
That's all. And we should note that if you look on this screen share, this trail here for the stream, this is the stream that comes across the driveway to 1439 Brush Hill Road, just for everybody's information. Okay, that's the same stream that comes right across that we had a lot of discussion about coming across the stream earlier a couple of years ago. Just FYI.
sure.
With the outfall pipe.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, well, this is informational only. We appreciate it. And
John?
it would, yes, you have a question?
Sorry, can you just run me through how the exemption works for this type of activity? 'Cause
Sure.
it's an excavation, it's not side casting, right? You're actually gonna excavate and move it to another location
Sure.
on site?
Correct. In this situation, there are situations where that is actually okay to do. But in this one, it doesn't make sense from a number of different reasons. So yes, it's simply scooping out and moving within uplands.
And so where's just clarify, I'm just looking in the letter, I just want to make sure I
Sure.
understand how the exemption's worded on this. Just because it seems that
It may or
it's a
may
very
not be
specific location.
okay. It may or may not be in the letter. This is goes back to the enabling legislation actually of conservation commissions. They mosquito control, state reclamation board mosquito control was actually made, the activities undertaken by our department are exempt from Conservation Commission jurisdiction of the Wetlands Protection Act. I don't have a copy of that right here, but I can certainly send that along, the chapter 252.
And is it just the conservation commissions, or is it also the State Wetlands Protection Act that you're exempting?
It's actually, well, it's the State Wetlands Protection Act. Typically in a town, the Conservation Commission is the entity that enforces the Wetlands Protection Act. We are also exempt from anything below that from the towns. You can't make it more strict on us either.
Understood,
So
understood.
it starts at that level. That's not to say that we are fully exempt. We do have to follow regulations. We have BMPs. We're revisiting all that right now, and
So
a different
does it
different form.
follow under the EEA BMP plan approval, or is it?
This is a specific, I wish I had a copy with me, and I'm sorry if I had thought of this, I would have put together a little bit of a history. I apologize. Because I had a feeling this might come up, and I have not been 100%. But we worked on, it's a more of a departmental agreement with BMPs. I can supply you with them. We're not exempt from federal regulation, so we do have to follow along, whether it's a programmatic general permit or a general permit. They're constantly changing. So I started in 1998 and started working with the Army Corps of Engineers to make sure that we were compliant with all of their regulations. And we've since, anytime that they've changed their general permit, we revisit that and we go over all the categories of exemptions to make sure we maintain compliance, don't have to file, but we would have to file federally. There are agricultural exemptions, that allow us to do our specific work, maintenance work, Clean Waters Act. There's a lot of different policies that come into play. And you can reference I'm trying to think if it's the GEIR.
So you do have a state reviewed
Yes.
full EA, and it
Um,
doesn't just apply to application of pesticides.
It does not.
It includes mechanical.
Spent a lot of time on it. Not to say it doesn't need to be revisited, and probably will be. I did do some work on that back in the early 2000s. It took many volleys to come up with anything. So we do our best to maintain that. We also we still want to maintain our ties with the individual towns, and certainly take recommendations from you, the commission. Even though we are exempt, that doesn't mean any of us would want to close a door and say, hey, we're not going to listen to you. We value the
The only
information
reason,
you're giving.
so to clarify, the only reason I'm bringing it up is because, we see these exemption notifications, fairly regularly. There was some confusion, was it last year, with the MBTA, or it wasn't MBTA, it was the services company for the MBTA, indicating that their work was exempt, but it wasn't really clear how the exemption applied, and so there's a lot of confusion about that. So just making sure I understand where it, I'm aware that mosquito control work has certain exemptions. I just wanted to make sure that the work that was being proposed falls under that.
Oh, sure, and I appreciate it. I'm usually a lot better versed at it too. I haven't had to explain it in a long time, admittingly. So I apologize for not being clear and stumbling.
That's all right.
But I am happy to send you some follow-up information.
Yeah, if you could, just to confirm, and then, if there's in the future when you submit the letter, if there is something specific that says
Basically, all of our work is exempt from the Conservation Commission. So it's not going to be specific projects. We do not fall under the jurisdiction of a Conservation Commission. So there was an agreement made, and no one can come up with the exact parties. It was under like DEQE at the time, before DEP, and DCR, and we agreed to do a notification process. And that's how the notification process began. And that was somewhere in like 87. That might be referenced in the letter.
Okay, so it wouldn't be under chapter 252 of the.
That would not be in chapter 252.
Okay.
It was an agreement that came out at some sort of state reclamation and mosquito control board meeting, I believe. And that board oversees mosquito control in the state. And it consists of a DCR member, a DEP member, and there's another one on there, and I apologize for not remembering who it is. I feel so, I'm sorry, but it's not DPH.
Maybe Fish and Wildlife, perhaps.
No.
Yes, thank you.
All right, that's very helpful to us, and I think it was a good point made by Hans. By way of recommendations, understanding the exemption, but by way of recommendations, mine's going to be a question, and that is, if you've got a bobcat in there doing some of the excavating of the sediment, what kind of tires, treads do you use? Do you have special equipment?
We're actually going to be using a link belt tracked excavator to do the actual excavation. What we were going to do is then use our bobcat to transport the material once it was excavated out of the pond. And we do actually have tracks for that as well, drive-on tracks. if necessary. But we also can use, we have these flexible mats that actually are more like a floor protection that could be employed, and even at times plywood, just more so we don't make ruts in people's lawns. Not, it's not like a swamp mat or anything like that. That's not the type of area that we're talking about moving the material. But as you know, when you continually traverse an area and, disturb it, whether it's wet or dry, you'd like to offer it some protection. So we would probably put down plywood and mats and just use the Bobcat really just to move the material from the excavator to that other spreading site,
All right,
if that makes sense.
It makes sense. I appreciate absolutely everything that you just said, with one small exception. You said you'd probably use some protective mats. Could you possibly say it differently and say we will use protective mats?
We will.
would be great.
I should mention too, our goal was to perhaps do this during the colder months when the ground is stiff and perhaps even with some snow cover, which can give us like a natural protection to the area as well. And of course, we will use the plywood or the flexible mats that we have that can
That's
be
great.
easily moved.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions or comments or suggestions by commissioners?
John Arthur, I have a question.
You're on, sir.
Thank you. Caroline, this is a very significant remediation initiative and one that's welcomed. Is there any thoughts on moving into the future as to how often this might be done so that there isn't a lapse in time like has been experienced up to this point?
Well, I think Erica had mentioned that they actually had hired a company in the 90s. Our goal, in meeting tonight and getting this information, is to let's try and eliminate the upstream issues, eliminate the sedimentation, the erosion, and perhaps prevent the filling in of the pond in the future, at least to the degree it's filled in now. They might be able to do some of their own maintenance and keep up on it if it's not having sediment dumped into it, such as it is now. We like things to go long term as possible, and just like to come in and kind of keep things clear by hand, and just a small impact like that. It's hard to say unless, we also, once we reach out to DOT, and I would really appreciate some involvement in that too, because we might need to time our project with that, to see if there is going to be some sort of cleaning of that area. So it might turn into something a little bit bigger, but I don't think it will change the scope of the plans that we have so far. Just the timing might change. Perhaps if they're going to start doing something upstream.
All right, thanks, Arthur. And Caroline, we will work with you on that. And Steve, if you could take on the responsibility for looking for the file and determining, what the O&M plan looks like, and perhaps contacting directly DOT folks to see what their reaction is to our request that they clean their detention basin.
Sure.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from members of the public? I don't see any, so that Caroline, we will stay in touch via Steve with you and make sure that the information from DOT is coordinated with your organization so we can move this along. It sounds like a good project.
John, I did have one other point, and that is information on the storage and fueling of heavy equipment.
Yeah, that's good point, Arthur. You want to follow up on that and bring that to the attention of Caroline?
Okay, so this isn't a large scale project, so I don't even see the need to be fueling on site. If it's helpful to know, we do use we've switched all of our equipment over to a biodegradable hydraulic oil that runs, basically like the blood through the machine. Um, we, I think about 15 years ago, we made that switch. It was a little bit costly, but if we ever had an event with a piece of equipment, it'd be a lot safer. um, the storage, I mean, I don't see us being here more than a couple of days, but there's a nice, the end of the roadway between the two houses is just like a dirt road that we can move the excavator up to. I don't foresee us having any kind of issues with having to store equipment where it's like an attractive nuisance. I don't know if that's what you're thinking. We'll make sure it's in a safe spot on the property near the houses.
Sure, we understand and appreciate the exemption discussion that we've had. But notwithstanding that, we generally have conditions that we apply to all of our permits, and that is
Okay.
that there be no storage overnight within our jurisdiction, and there will be no refueling
Okay.
within our jurisdiction, and that would be the 100 feet from the resource area.
Okay.
All right, and it sounds like that's doable for you from what you just said.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Arthur. That was a good point. Anything else?
Just one thing, maybe Caroline should talk to Kathy before they're going to do the project and just give us a schedule at some point. That's all. In the
Yeah,
future.
sure.
Yep. We'd like to know when you're doing it and maybe stop by and say hello.
Sure. And I don't want to rush it either. I'm going to have it kind of pending information as well. That's kind of how I went into this project too. And I did speak briefly with Kathy. So I appreciate you kind of being armed with some information for me tonight about what we had originally called a cistern, but I'm very happy to learn more. And I appreciate the time you've given me tonight as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Without further ado, then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Caroline, thank you very much for your presentation.
Well, thank you. I'm around anytime. You can reach out to me and I will get some more information back to you. Stay well.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. You too. Number 2 on the agenda is notice of intent at 65 School Street.
Can I jump in before
Sure.
we start?
Yes, indeed.
This is Ingrid Beatty. I just want to point out that I will be observing and commenting as a member of the public and an abutter to this property, not as a member of the Conservation Commission, and I will not vote on the notice of intent.
All right. Thank you very much, Ingrid. I appreciate that. All right, we're screen sharing here, and this is basically the intersection of Herrick Drive and School Street, just to get everybody oriented. And the number is, I believe, 65 School Street. And who would like to present this notice of intent?
So I'm Matt McCarthy, the owner of the lot. And for any questions that I might not be able to answer, I have my civil engineer on as well, Len, who Steve asked who it was earlier, in case there's something I can't answer for you guys.
Perfect. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you for having me. So what I'm proposing is a single family home for myself and my family to move from, hopefully in the future, from our current home in Milton. Consists of 4 bedrooms, car garage, and it's on a new subdivided lot from 61 School Street, which was the Giuliani Trust. I believe they broke it up previously on other lots as well in the neighborhood. And my land had the garage, shed, and part of the driveway on it at the time. It was their yard as well. And as you can see, it's located across from the Pine, I believe it's Pine Tree Brook is the name of the river or the stream, and it is between from Pine Tree, then it's School, Herrick, a house, and then my lot.
All right, and we see the 100-foot line and we see the 200-foot line.
Yep, so the 100-foot line, that's not an area that I planned on touching at all. And once I found out about it as well, after staking the lot, and then I called Steve to ask a question. He informed me about the 200-foot barrier as well for there. So I went back and had Lenny add all that in once I found out that I'd have to come in front of you guys with everything.
All right. So we see the screen shared engineering plan, which is
Yep.
very, very helpful to us. And I'll tell you that we have had some comments from members of the public that there's been some tree cutting going on. Can you tell us where, first of all, if there has been some tree cutting?
I had some trees removed prior to finding out about the Conservation Commission and all that. It was when I purchased the lot, I was told that it was buildable and hit all the guidelines. And so I had started to do some clearing while I was waiting on the building permit. And then once I found out about the Conservation Commission and all of that, so there was some along the front and then some in the main where the center of the lot was.
So as we're looking at it here, I see in the center of the lot where it says 3-car garage.
Yep.
Can you, just using that as a point of reference, can you tell us where the trees were cut? Number 1, number 2, the size of the trees, and number 3, the number of trees.
So I think it ended up being overall 17 total trees, from small branches to some bigger ones along the front. And then there was some towards the back of the lot, say where it says porch area. And then right along the 61 line, I removed a few that I had talked about the new homeowner with at 61 as well, that they asked me while we had the company in there.
When you said the 61 line,
yeah, where it says like the dark line, yep. Further back, yeah. There's a few back in that area, exactly where he is, yeah.
All right, so
and then a few behind where it is as well, sir, behind garage to be removed. There was some behind there as well.
Matt, can you hold on a minute?
Yeah.
We have a certain jurisdiction.
Yep.
And because Pine Tree Brook is a perennial stream, it's a 200-foot mark.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm concerned about is the number of trees that are to the right-hand side of the 200-foot black line. That would be the line that goes through the proposed new house.
Yes.
To the right of that, if you could concentrate on that and tell us within our jurisdiction, how many trees do you think you removed?
Probably 7 total, I would say. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'd say about 7.
All right.
Some of those were because the arborists that worked for the company told me they were rotted as well at the time. There was a few that I wasn't planning on originally taking.
And who was that arborist?
He worked for the tree company.
What was the tree company?
Egger and Sons.
Okay.
Again, if I knew about it not being an issue that I would have had to come in front of you guys, I would have done nothing up until that point. But I had already done it when I found out about that part.
And Matt, are there any stumps left that we can look at?
Yeah, there's some stumps.
All right, it's
I wasn't
appropriate that we
removed.
take a look at this, so I would propose that we do a site walk for the commission. Are there, I know that this weekend coming up is not convenient for some of the commission members. What about the following Saturday? Would that be appropriate for the commission members? And Matt, obviously you'd want to be there as well.
Sure, I can make whatever works for you guys. I can make work.
Okay. How about the following Saturday? Steve, I don't have a calendar in front of me. Do you have a date on that?
22nd, John?
22nd. I just looked at my calendar, John. I'm not available that weekend either.
Yeah, I'm out of town, John, on that weekend.
All right, and the following weekend would be the 29th, is that
Yep.
correct?
I'm good for the 29th.
Todd, can you do the 29th?
Yep.
Arthur?
Yes.
All right, and I can do the 29th. I'll certainly reach out and check with Wendy. Hans, I'm not looking at, I don't see you, so I apologize for not asking you right away. Hans, are you available on the 29th?
I'm not 100%, but I'll let you know.
All right, thanks. All right, thank you. I'm going through my screen here and I can't find it, Hans. I know you're there. All right. So, Matt, if that's all right, and it with your engineer, if you could be there, and I'm not cutting off discussion because we need to know more about the plans as well. But
And again, I can make that weekend work as far as I know as of right now.
all
Unless
right,
my wife
perfect.
tells me differently, but as of right now, we're available.
All right, and we usually try to start at, it depends on who's voting here, but we usually start at either 8 or 8:30. Does anybody on the commission have a preference? Without
I'm
it
fine
being
with
stated,
it.
but go ahead, say again. 8 o'clock then, let's see, if nobody objects, then we'll start at 8 o'clock on Saturday, the 29th for a site walk. And that is a public meeting. It will be published. We will have an agenda for members of the public. And unless there's an objection from the homeowner, they could enter upon the property. If there is an objection from the homeowner, the applicant in this case, then the commission will enter in to the site to look around. And then if there's any discussion, then we would have that in a public area so that the public could attend. It's usually not a big deal, Matt, but it's if you own the property, then
I'm fine with it. Whatever,
Okay.
whatever makes it easiest.
that would be the easiest if the public could be
Yeah,
present.
I'm okay with it.
All right. Now, how about questions about the plan itself from members of the commission? And we're usually concerned with drainage. And can you just go through what the drainage will look like if you have any? I don't see it from here, and I've got the plans
There-
next to me.
It does have, and Lenny can speak more to this. It has two Cultec systems for the, I believe it's for the 20-year storm is what Milton requires. So it would
25.
have, Lenny, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Len Bouffard, CEC, Peabody, Mass. It has two Caltech 330 XLHD infiltrator systems. One that's going to be underneath the driveway, which will take the driveway runoff, which is fed from two trench drains, I can say that fast, which will go into a deep sump catch basin, then go into the infiltration system. That one is sized to handle at least the 25-year storm. And the rear system we will handle, that will take the driveway and half the house. The other half of the house will go to a system in the rear yard, and that one is sized to handle up to the 100-year storm. All downspouts will go into the infiltration systems. In the event of a very large storm, of course, the downspouts will just discharge into the yard. The front system will actually end up coming out of the trench drain, going backwards if it fills up that much, and then just go into the street and then into the city drainage system. But since it will have an oil hood installed on the catch basin, there shouldn't be any oil coming out of the system. It should be just water.
All right, a question. This is like a hypothetical question. You said that the front, I'll call it the front system, which is half the house and the driveway,
Yes.
is good for a 25-year storm. And
That is
the
correct.
rear system would be the other half of the house is good to a 100-year. And I know you had two Cultec chambers. What would it take to get the front system from 25-year storm up to a 100-year storm?
I don't know offhand. So let me think of the unit. Unfortunately, I don't have my my calculator right in front of me. The program. I would probably have to increase it. Probably 2,500. Probably 4 more Caltech units. Right now, there's 6 in each system. So the front one would probably require 10. But I could get back. I can get back to you on that tomorrow morning.
Okay, yeah, if you could convey that information to Steve.
Yeah,
that
sure.
would be helpful. Okay.
I'll send it to Matt and then Matt can send it to you
I can
guys.
send it over. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Questions from commission members?
John,
Any,
I should let you know that this does not have a DEP file number, nor has it been even introduced into the DEP database system yet, as of about 5 o'clock tonight. Okay, so we may see some more of the comments from DEP, and one of the comments, pretty common comment from DEP is alternatives analysis. Could the home and garage be placed further away out of the 200? So they will want to, I'm sure that they'll have that comment, that there's an alternatives analysis required under the regulations, Matt and Len.
Mhm.
So you need to start thinking about how to address that requirement under the regs. That's all. It's at 10.584 if you want to know
Okay.
more about it.
Yeah. Well, if need be, we can move the house back. That's not an issue. Well,
That might be useful to you, actually.
yeah, yeah. It just would make the driveway bigger, which would make the front system larger. It's because the driveway would be bigger. So we'd need more infiltration for that. But
You
I'll
might-
I'll discuss it with Matt, and we'll see if we can, have to move, if we move the house back another maybe 15, 20 feet, and we'll see what we can do.
not to help you design, but you might want to consider pervious pavement as well, or a pervious block for the driveway. That's all.
I had brought it up with Matt when we were discussing the driveway originally, and I did the design based on non-pervious pavers, just so that I know the system would be at least large enough for that. So if we switch to pervious, it would probably be large enough now for the 100-year storm, because about 50% of the driveway would end up being pervious, which would reduce the amount of impervious that we would have to infiltrate.
Sure. So you may have some comments from DEP about that. That's all. I'm just anticipating what
Yeah,
they may say. Okay,
Yeah, we have filed with the DEP. They haven't gotten back with the number yet.
understood. Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why, perhaps.
Yes.
So
And Matt, so that you know this, it may sound like, form over substance, but we cannot take a vote unless we have a DEP number. Now, we've got a public meeting continued until the 29th of this month anyway. So I'm sure by that time you'll have the number, but just keep an eye on it to make
Yeah,
sure.
I think I sent everything in even before I even handed it over to Kathy. So I'm hopefully we should have that soon.
All right, fair enough. Any other questions from commissioners? Any elevation issues there, Todd? I'm asking you to.
No.
And I don't mean to limit it to you, Todd, but I know you're pretty sensitive to those issues.
Well, I mean, they're taking the old garage out of the back and the pavement to be removed, which is a help. And the house is coming forward, so. I mean, elevation wise, I don't see any real big issues.
Okay. Just checking with your area of expertise.
No, I understand. I don't see any really big drop-offs or big problems.
All right. And what about members of the public, abutters, or any member of the public? Are there any questions or concerns that folks would like to address or like us to address? Hearing none. Anything else from the commission? Or shall we continue this with the assent of the applicant until January 29th?
If I could just add too, I know I'm happy to add back as well once the project hopefully is approved and finished, native trees and new greenery, shrubbery, and make it as beautiful as possible as well for the surrounding yard and things like that as well.
Well, that's a great point, because we do have a performance standard for taking down trees. It's a little bit more complicated now. It used to be 3-to-1 basically, but right now we use diameter at breast height. So it's about, whatever, 4 feet off the ground, 4.5 feet off the ground. Whatever it's actually the circumference as opposed to the diameter, but it's the sum total of those circumferences of the trees that you take down, you have to be replaced. So let's say, I'll just make this up, if you had 30 inches in circumference that you had taken down, then you'd have to replace it with 30 inches of trees, which would be 6 5-inch trees.
Yeah,
Or-
and I mean, I already know, my wife already has planned, what type, some trees and things like that. And I've talked to the closest abutters who have all been, super helpful. And we've talked about, adding some new arborvitae's and things like that as, fencing like they have as well. So happy to do any of that, whatever, you guys.
I remember the
see
tree
fit.
thing. I've dealt with it with 333 Brush Hill.
That's perfect then. So if you're familiar with it, we would like to see a landscape plan.
Sure, I can get one up from Matt. Yeah, I can
All
send
right,
it to you guys.
That's perfect. And Matt, you've already identified our issue with native plants and trees. That's very important to us. So whatever the
Yeah,
landscape
I've
plan
talked
is,
to the neighbor who's been through this, was super helpful once I found out about it. So
great. That's good
willing to
news.
work with you guys as much as I can. Just want to be able to live there.
All right, we like to hear that, Matt. Thank you. All right, if there are no other questions, then we'll continue it. It'll be a public meeting, but it'll be held at, we'll start at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, January 29th. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Okay, you too. Next on the agenda is number 3, which is 582 Blue Hill Avenue.
That should be Phil Cordero. Is that correct, Phil?
That's correct, Mr. Ivas. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Phil Cordero from Allen and Major Associates. We are going to be representing this project on behalf of Comprehensive Land Holdings. For familiarity with the commission, as you can see from the plan that's on Steve's screen, we are at 582 Blue Hill Avenue, which has an existing residential dwelling and carriage house located on the property, as well as some improvements in terms of greenscape. We have recently completed permitting with the Zoning Board of Appeals for a comprehensive permit through the Massachusetts Statute, Chapter 40B General Law, for the creation of 84 residential units to be constructed on this site, along with associated parking, both subterranean and surface parking. What you're looking at on the screen right now is the existing conditions plan. And maybe, Steve, if I could ask you to jump to the next slide, which will show the commission the proposed conditions, I think would be helpful. Or one more after this, please.
Sure, right there.
So there you're looking at the structured parking below the residential buildings, and maybe one more slide advance, please. And that will show you the breadth of the project in terms of a surface layout. Construction of residential units, surface parking, and underground parking, as I alluded to. We completed permitting with the Zoning Board of Appeals. They issued a permit. As part of that process, they issued a permit that the need for the residential housing on this property and permitted under the state statutes allows certain waiverability of local bylaws. So I want to alert the commission as at the onset of the introduction that the zoning board granted certain waivers of local bylaws, of which the Conservation Commission, the wetland bylaw, is also part of that. And we can talk through that process as we go forward. In terms of wetland jurisdictional area on the southeasterly corner of the site, Steve, if I could ask if you could just pan to the right, pan the image to the right, please. Yes. Just off property at Robbins Lane, we have an intermittent stream with bordering vegetated wetlands adjacent to it. That was permitted through an ORAD process. So we have a defined delineation that's been accepted by the commission, which establishes the BVW, which by graphic on the plan establishes a 25-foot no disturb zone per the wetlands bylaw. And then it establishes just to the left of that screen left, the 100-foot jurisdictional area. And it is within this area that we are seeking the commission's permission this evening to allow for the construction of our stormwater basin. And that you can see where the cursor is moving around, that is the inflow, the outflow, the riprap overflow from the basin. And by advancing to the next slide, you might see in greater detail in that same locus the grading that's associated with that, the creation of that stormwater basin. On site, we have a combination of both underground stormwater retention systems and this open air surface basin. The surface air basin is the last point of discharge before the stormwater runoff rejoins the natural water recourse that ultimately flows into that intermittent stream and then continues downstream. As part of the process with the Zoning Board of Appeals, they engaged Tetra Tech as the town's peer review consultant to review the technical aspects of the engineering, most notably the stormwater, and ultimately the conditions of the previous engineer who designed the site, which is DeSalle Burke Sala. They had satisfied all of the conditions and questions raised by Tetra Tech to confirm that everything here and presented to this commission is of sound engineering practice. And in doing so, we can present and represent to the board that we are in compliance with the Massachusetts stormwater standards as required, and a checklist to that effect is included in the notice of intent, that all of our stormwater systems that ultimately will discharge through this basin will meet the required sediment removal rates of 80% at a minimum. We will have a stormwater collection system that's equipped with catch basins with hoods and outlets. We will have proprietary water quality treatment separators prior to our underground infiltration systems. And then we have completed and compiled an operation and maintenance plan for all of those systems that will run in perpetuity to the project, assuming an order of conditions is granted by the commission and the site is ultimately constructed. What's shown on the plan, both plan south and plan east of the stormwater basin by the darkened dashed X line is our erosion control barrier, which will be erected at the time of construction to prevent any downstream siltation. That will run around the entire limit of work of the property and will entail a staked erosion control silt fence with mulch wattles staked into the ground to prevent any siltation from leaving the property. We have no impact within the 25-foot no disturb zone. In fact, we have our primary disturbance is approximately 50 feet away from the accepted resource area under the ORAD. So we've maintained a healthy margin to ensure that we have no encroachments within that zone. Right at the outfall is about 50 feet away. And then the flared end section due south of where the cursor is moving there we go. Thank you, Steve. Oops. Is just shy of 50 feet, approximately 45 feet away with our riprap splash pad to prevent erosion and scour. We do not have our Mass DEP file number yet either. Certainly they're backed up right now in terms of their processing. So I understand that it's unlikely we'll be able to close the hearing this evening until that process is. So I think at best what I'd like to accomplish is having given that overview of the project, discuss through with the commission what this project entails, certainly how we comport with the standards that are put out in front of us, discuss as necessary the process that we went through with the Zoning Board of Appeals and any questions that may arise relative to the issuance of a comprehensive permit, and lay out the groundwork as to how we can work through the project and hopefully ultimately solicit an order of conditions from this group. I am happy to get into all of the technical details with the commission at your discretion here this evening, but without overly burdening the commission with all of those details, I'll leave it to your discretion. I do want to point out, just for the record, so that way there's no discrepancies in the discussion, the plans that are illustrated on the screen are reflective of DeSalle Burke Sala, which is one engineering firm that was engaged. Allen and Major Associates is going to represent the project going forward and deal with any questions that may arise to this Conservation Commission. So that's my overview, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I'm happy to field questions and walk through the remainder of the project that the commission sees appropriate, please.
All right, thank you for a very clear presentation. I do have some questions, and I may start with the easiest ones. In terms of the snow removal plan, I was concerned because in one area it said, see if I can get my notes, Um, just bear with me for a minute. Snow management.
Take your time.
I'm concerned with chemical controls in terms of what is being used. And much of this would be stormwater runoff, but if it contained the chemicals, and I think it's probably somewhere around. I didn't write down the page number for this, but there's a quote in your report that says that the placement of the excess snow would be, quote, on pervious areas. But I don't know where those pervious areas are. And what
So-
I'm really concerned with is dumping the snow next to the stream, particularly in light of my other concerns with chemical controls.
Okay. Well, I guess let's work backwards if you don't mind. If you or if Steve wanted to advance the slide back to sheet 5 of 11, which is the layout plan, there are clouded zones. That was it, Steve. If you could back up. There we go. And if you could maybe zoom out on this screen, please. Sorry to be giving direction, but we work with
No problem.
what we're
Happy
given.
to take direction. Happy to take direction.
No problem.
Yep.
There we go. So we have, oh, it's moving on me, no problem. So we have notations right here, Mr. Chairman, of snow storage. So this is what's meant by pervious areas. So in no case will we be storing anything within the stormwater basin. And we can most definitely work with the commission to make sure that nothing is stored in adjacent of this 100-foot wetland buffer, of course. Where we identify snow storage areas, it's where that melt water can empty into our stormwater systems and be properly treated to remove any sediment that may be contained within there. So that's how those zones are identified. Here's another one in here, proposed storage area. So that's what's denoted by the pervious area surface, sir.
But the one at the lower right-hand corner of the plan,
This
right there, that is the detention basin. Are you proposing to dump the snow into the detention basin?
No, sir. So this is the stormwater basin zone right here. And then our highlighted snow storage areas are in these zones, sir. So what ultimately happens is with the meltdown of snow melt, it will enter into our stormwater collection zones based on the grading, and it'll be treated and handled through our proprietary water quality CDS units and the underground systems, which are located here. They're not quite shown on this plan, but they are located in this zone. And all of that will be handled and treated before it can discharge into this stormwater basin, which then would ultimately discharge towards that wetland resource area, BVW intermittent stream zone, sir.
And what kind of limitations do you have on the treating chemicals? What are you proposing to use?
So we can talk through that. In fact, I'm just looking through my notes here. I don't have it at my fingertips, sir, but I'm going to find it just as quickly as you alluded to it, and walk through. Obviously, the easiest that we work through is sand. Everybody uses sand, but the effectiveness of sand is not as effective as some of the chemical laden, the calcium chloride systems that are out there. There are much better quality systems out there to be used. The sand also works against us in that it ultimately requires more maintenance for our stormwater systems. So when they refer to anything chemical laden, they're referring to the calciums, the NaCl, the sodium chlorides, the sodium calciums, which is what Mass DOT would use on their roadways.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but there's a difference between what Mass DOT uses on the Massachusetts Turnpike and what you're putting right next to an intermittent stream.
Sure.
That's my concern, is how do you keep that chemical laden melting snow away from the intermittent stream? Because that's where the overflow, that's where that riprap is going, right into our stream.
So what we could do, and we just walk through another schematic for you, sir. If I could ask you Steve, I'm going to ask you to change slide one more time
Certainly.
to the next slide. Please let me clear my graphics here. One more slide, please. And this one more clearly illustrates the interceptor rows, the isolator rows, and the underground stormwater system. So again, let's take this locus area, for example, which has some snow storage. This meltwater drains into this catch basin, where it becomes soluble with the water that's inside the catch basin in terms of, excuse me, the 4-foot sump of water that's there. This is a proprietary water quality treatment device, a CDS water quality unit, which provides additional separation of any solubles and or sediments and floatables, so we can maintain and control the runoff through there. And then that water runoff goes into an underground recharge system where that water, that first flush water, which is what contains that snow meltdown, is recharged into the groundwater. And any remaining compounds or chemicals, as you refer to them, are removed through the transmission of water through the soil. So this is, again, this is water going down into the ground. And then as that builds up, that's when you get the overflow, sir, and members of the commission that then go into the basin. So the presumption of chemically laden water is a bit of a misnomer in terms of the actual water quality that will be going into the basin that would then ultimately overflow through this flared end and then can ultimately overflow into the intermittent stream. So these controls in total are what removes any snow and de-icing treatment.
Phil, thank you for your explanation. I'm still a little fuzzy, and I think your answer was not quite clear regarding the actual logistics of how the sodium and calcium salts are removed. Can you provide us with those details?
Why don't let me get for you, since I recognize we're not going to close the hearing this evening unless something amazing happens. Let me get you some additional detail for you on that from the DEP processes regarding snow removal and salt for you. And I'm sure that their documentation will provide a far better and more succinct explanation that I can, and I'll just do it in justice.
Yep, Phil, that would be great. But in
Sure.
addition, you mentioned a proprietary, and I'm quoting, proprietary unit. And what would be helpful to us would be to get the specs and the product literature for that to help us understand how exactly the chemicals are going to be dealt with.
Sure. We have in the operation and maintenance package that was submitted as part of the notice of intent is the CDS operating manual, and within there is the literature. So we can attack this two ways. One, I don't want to send you on a wild goose chase to read lots of technical literature, but what I can do is pull appropriate excerpts for you and provide that as a response to you.
Yeah, we're not shy about consuming the details either.
But I would never tell you not to. By all means, read everything, and we'll answer any and all questions with what you have in front of you. Sometimes it's not for the faint of heart, so we'll attack it both ways.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that prior to this meeting. Where in the packet is a copy of the manual?
I will find it for you. I don't have the full package in front of me, Ms. Beatty. So I apologize for not being able to provide you the exact specifics on the page number.
Okay, great. I'll come across it, I'm sure. Thank you.
We will make sure that you have that data.
Super, thanks.
Another point and sort of the logistical side.
Yes, please.
On page 11 of your report, and I'm in section 4, stormwater report. I am concerned with the O&M plan that you've got. And for record keeping, which I find on page 11, it says that the site manager has a $2,500 to $3,500 a year budget, which for all of the tasks listed, that's not very much money set aside for them, but whatever. The record keeping provision of it says that records of inspections and maintenance for the non-structural and structural operations performed or organized by the site manager for the property shall be up to date, available for review and inspection on site, and submitted to the town of Milton. I just want to make sure that available for inspection as opposed to submitted to the town of Milton Conservation Commission. I want to make sure that they're submitted. So I'd like to make sure that that's clear to the applicant, that we would require a submission of those records as opposed to simply making them available to us.
Understood. We can work through clarifying that language, Mr. Chairman. Submittal to the commission is fine. It looks like the CDS manual, sorry to back up 1 second. 2 pages later begins the CDS manual that Ms. Beatty was inquiring about.
Okay.
But we can talk through the specifics about the snow action and the chemicals as I aggregate the data for you.
Yep. Thank you, Bill.
Certainly.
That's great. So I've got some of the reporting issues, the snow management. I'm still stuck on, you've circled that lower area where they, and I guess I'm on the southeast side, the lower right-hand corner. You circled that area where the snow storage is going to be. Where's your roadway? Because it looked, a couple of times, it looked like you were putting snow right in the middle of the road.
So I'm going to do a bad doodling job, but I'm trying to highlight it here with the green line to denote where the actual roadway is. So those areas that I highlighted prior to are actually on the top of curb zones where we have grasscape, sir. So I don't know if I've done it justice with my hand doodle, but hopefully it creates a semblance as to where the curb line falls here. And now if I recreate, so the purple representing the snow storage areas that we discussed briefly earlier, generally that's the relationship. Does that clarify it at all?
No, I've got the same problem because that lower right-hand purple circle is moved a little bit, but it's so far tonight, it's either been in the detention basin or it's been in the road. Now you've got it on the building.
Well, that's just my drawing, Mr. Chairman, just looking at the scale. Steve, would you mind, could you zoom in on that corner right where the cursor is right now, please?
Yes, I think so.
I just want to make sure we don't lose anything in translation based on my sloppy Zoom drawing.
How's that?
That should be fine. So again, with my I'll use my purple again. This is the area that was highlighted as snow storage. So hopefully that comes across clearly. I don't see the same thing necessarily, so I'm drawing it on top of the curb line area. Is that working for members of the commission?
I see it. It doesn't look like a whole lot of space for a lot of snow.
So,
and I know there are other locations, but I'm still, one of the things that I was hung up on is that there is a discretionary call, and I don't have the page, it's somewhere around 9 through 11, but it talks about excess snow being removed. But it seems like, if in the discretion of the site manager, it's on page 9. If excessive snow inhibits movement around the site, or the stormwater management facilities, the contractor will be responsible to move the snow from the site and disposed of in a legal manner. So that's snow management, page 9 at the bottom. And again, that was my concern, because what I'm looking at is either it will inhibit the movement on the roadway, or it's going to inhibit the functioning of the stormwater management facility. So it's pretty tight there. So I don't know if perhaps your O&M should have some kind of criteria for utilization as to when and under what circumstances snow would be removed. It sounds like you don't have a whole lot of space on site to store snow.
It is a tight site. And I would accept your statement that there's not a whole lot of area for the snow management. So the thresholds and the triggers that we utilize are generally as follows. We will pile snow operationally in unused landscaped areas where it will not ultimately destroy any plants. And that's why these areas that I've been highlighting here this evening were chosen. The other triggers, it cannot encumber the necessary parking to support the residential base that we have. And then most definitely, it cannot encumber emergency apparatus and their ability to travel around the site. So I think that's the language that was trying to be said in the passage that you quoted, sir, that if it doesn't encumber the site, if it doesn't impede movement around the site, then it can be piled in let's call them secondary areas. If at any point it triggers any of those other items that I just mentioned, takes up valuable parking, can somehow impede an emergency service call, kill some of the expensive landscaping, then it's hauled away off-site. The discretion lies in whether any of those conditions are met, but obviously in the quantity of the snow that we have available to us. You know, a 1-inch snowstorm is much more manageable than an 8 or a 12-inch or anything above that. And we need to make sure we maintain some reasonable flexibility in terms of how the site manager takes care of that. That's why it's not specifically written. It's sort of crafted as an if-then statement. But we can certainly work with you in terms of refining that to make sure that it's as definitive as it can be in support of the commission, but still allow the site management to take place.
All right, understood.
Okay.
Now, my I was actually smiling to myself because when you were talking to Ingrid, you were talking about some of the technical aspects of the, the water cleaning system and the water quality control system. That's what she does for a living. So she will be delighted to see all of the technical specs.
And I mean, Mr. Chairman and Ms.
lives
Beatty,
that, breathes that, thinks about
I
it.
mean no disrespect by ever glossing over any technical detail. And if you want to get into the weeds, we will absolutely do it. Ms. Beatty, you and I, we can talk about everything because that's what we do. And unfortunately, when we get to some meetings, sometimes nobody ever wants to hear how the sausage is made, but we'll absolutely do it if you'd like. So I mean no disrespect by being glib. That's why I want to leave it to the discretion of the commission. We will roll up our sleeves and get into it if you would absolutely like that. We're prepared for that.
But no, I brought that up only to, it was a precursor to my claiming my own ignorance, because I was going to move into the hydrological aspects of this. And I will confess total ignorance, and you will have to really dumb it down for me. But
we'll do it whatever way you'd like.
When I started looking at it, I was concerned with two things. That one, I don't have a hydrological background, and this is a tight site. It's got a lot of impervious surface, and the water is going to go somewhere. And I was concerned that I don't have enough background. And the first thought that I had is that I need to have a consultant. Now I'm speaking and I won't speak for the whole commission because some of them have a lot more experience than I do in terms of hydrological calculations. But I am concerned with that. And part of that concern was verified when I did read, and I'm sure you've had the opportunity to read this too. But we did receive information from, I guess, the preliminary notice under Chapter 214, Section 7A, the intention for a 10 taxpayer or citizen suit, suggesting that the Superior Court enjoin part of this project in order to protect the resources. So I read it, and I'm sure you've read it too.
Yes.
And I'm stumped by some of the basic problems that were listed in this notice. And I know it's a precursor; it's not the final. But when I did read it, I was concerned with a couple of different things. And one is measuring the hydrological output at and again, I'm going to, refer to this notice of intent to file a civil action.
Excuse me.
Reach 5.4 as opposed to reach 9R. I'm sorry, 5R, that rather than 9R.
Mhm.
And I wanted to get your take on this because it seems like there's a big difference in measuring the discharge at either the point of discharge or the property line versus 9R, which appears to be where, some distance from the project site where it joins the discharge into Balster Brook. And we do have concerns over Balster Brook. That's, a treasure in the town. It's a perennial stream. And a lot of this water, it appears it's going to end up in Balster Brook.
Mhm.
So I wonder if you could comment on the Daniel Hill law notice, and in particular, whether or not you agree with the criticism of the hydrological analysis,
Mhm.
where the suggestion is it's the wrong point of discharge that's being measured. And there's also like a secondary criticism, and that is that it's only the rate and not the rate and the volume that is being measured. And you may want to take a crack at that and point me in the right direction.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Let me see if I can walk a political tightrope for a moment. So, as much as I would like to be direct with the commission, obviously that is an appeal now at Superior Court, and Hill Law has laid claim against the Zoning Board Comprehensive Permit. And I am not obviously the legal representative on the project. Mr. Schumer is actually on the call in the waiting room. If we need to consult him for legal advice, he is available. So because it is the legal matter, I would defer in terms of rendering an opinion whether I agree or disagree at the moment, if that's okay. And that's not an avoidance of statement. It's just we have to go through a process, obviously, in terms of how we handle this appeal. What I can offer up, Mr. Chairman, is that in making the design of the site under the Massachusetts Stormwater Standards, they identify the design points of any property as being the limits of the property or wetland resource areas. And that is the common engineering design approach as to how to look at stormwater. And the presumption is that if you analyze to those extents, you establish parameters, whether the parameter is peak flow or peak volume, and I'll circle back on that in a moment. You establish what those maximum existing flow rates are from the site. And the mandate under the stormwater regulations is we cannot exceed them. We either have to meet them or reduce them. And that's what this project does. And when I asserted during the introduction that we meet the stormwater standards, that is inherently one of those stormwater standards, that we do not exceed pre-development flow rates. If we do that at the property line or the nearest wetland resource area, it is a reasonable assumption, and I know I'm using that word assume dangerously, or it is a presumption under the stormwater management that there are no downstream impacts. Now, you made reference, Mr. Chairman, that it does not speak to volumes. The Massachusetts stormwater regulations do not speak to matching pre and post development volumes. It is a well-known gap in the regulations. Certain local municipalities have adopted additional stormwater standards that require the handling of volume. So they require that both the pre and post development rates are not exceeded, nor are the pre and post development volumes. That's not the situation that we have here. Because the project is sought under the Comprehensive Permit Act, Massachusetts General Law Statute 40B, the project is required to meet the state development standards, and that's what it does. The Hill appeal obviously claims that's an improper analysis. And I guess I would sum it up by saying that is a point of view that has been laid out by the opposing parties to the project.
I understood, and I respect your diplomacy in trying not to, enter into a legal fray. And I'm doing the same thing because I don't want to, take a side. All I want to do is ask a hydrological question.
Right.
And whether or not this is a good project or a bad project from a hydrological perspective. And that's why I think I started this by saying that I'm going to need some help. And I, for one, would propose that we get a hydrology expert on board as a consultant. And under Chapter 44, Section 53G, the Conservation Commission is entitled to retain a consultant at the expense of the applicant. And I'm not trying to make it expensive for you, but I'm trying to get some help for me and perhaps for others that would like some assistance on this hydrological analysis, because I'm looking at a tremendous amount of water that's being created by an impervious surface. You know offhand what the net increase in impervious surface on the site is?
I don't offhand, but I can certainly get that number for you. If I could offer up sort of a strategic point of analysis for you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the commission to think about. Listen, I've been there. We've presented to a number of boards and commissions, and I certainly understand the difficult position that you're in. And in certain elements, I cannot ask you to take my word for it. So the process that we undertook with the Zoning Board of Appeals, they were in the similar situation. And I would dare say, without disrespect to them, they were even less positioned than you are to make interpolations on hydrogeological analyses and stormwater management, et cetera, because it's just not the world that they operate in. So under that same 53G statute, in their case, the Mass General Law, Chapter 40B statute, they were certainly afforded the opportunity to retain a consultant to advise on exactly the same matters. And we undertook that process, and that was professional engineer Sean Reardon of Tetra Tech. He worked solely on behalf of the town, and the back and forth was with him reviewing such matters and him ultimately advising the zoning board as whether this met those standard engineering practices and the regulations that you would like to know if this project does in fact meet. Now, while again, I would never make a stand on legal matters, you certainly have your rights under the 53G statute to retain your own consultant. But might I suggest I could provide for you and members of the commission all of the correspondence associated with Mr. Reardon on this project. And it would likely outline for you at the onset of the project, he identified these 10 issues, and I'm just picking a number, that's not an exactness, but he identified 10. And the engineer responded to those, and then that 10 became 4. The engineer responded again, and that 4 became 1. Engineer responded, and that 1 became 0. And he ultimately recommended approval for the project. And through that correspondence, that back and forth, it might create for you that roadmap of understanding to know how he reviewed the site as an independent engineer and how he ultimately could assert that it was an approvable project. Would the commission consider utilizing that information, at least as a precursor before rendering a decision that you need to retain an additional consultant to essentially review the same material?
Well, I don't know about the sequence of it, but I agree wholeheartedly with you that more information is good. So yes, I accept your invitation to provide that correspondence. That would be very helpful to us.
Okay.
I'm not sure that we have to delay a decision because even that correspondence might need some expert analysis. That is, it's beyond our expertise perhaps. And we could do both, and we could multitask. We could get somebody to help us understand that which has already been done. But we definitely would invite and request that you provide that data.
John,
I will do that. Sure.
would Mr. Reardon be available to maybe give us the long story short of the review? The individual that did the review?
I don't see any reason why we couldn't, Mr. Lingen. We could certainly engage him. And we do have, just in the interest of full disclosure, we do have another project pending with the zoning board in Milton, and Mr. Reardon is the peer review engineer on that for these same applicants. So I don't see any disconnect in requesting him to appear in front of the commission, and you could hear in his own words where he landed in terms of his decision and the statements that he made in his peer review letters, which we'll happily provide to you.
Thank you for that response. I can only reiterate that one does not preclude the other. We
Understood.
definitely would invite his input.
Yeah, I don't mean to assume or otherwise assert the commission's decision. Your decisions are your own. But I would want you to have any and all information available. And since that had already been done, it may ultimately give you what you're looking to seek, Mr. Chairman.
That would be great, and we thank you for that.
Okay.
Is that something that you could either provide to Steve Ivas directly or would ask Mr. Reardon to do that?
I will provide it to Steve directly. We have it. And it is part of the public record. It's on the Milton Zoning Board of Appeals website. All of that correspondence currently exists. We'll just, similar to what I said to Ms. Beatty, we'll aggregate it together so you don't have to go on a hunt and find mission for it.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Other commissioners with questions? Any questions or comments from commissioners? We should have a site walk. I should say that, and that we could perhaps do it on the same date. Hello? Did I lose everybody?
John, is that a question for us?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'll be eager to digest the review engineer comments. And yes, happy to do a site walk if you feel it's appropriate.
Yeah, as long as we can get that information in the near future, the 29th would probably work if we could go to the site and take a look. It would be very helpful if we had the information before that.
We
Yeah,
can
it's up to-
accommodate that, Mr. Chairman. We'll have it to you within a day, since it readily exists.
No, good. That's perfect.
Mhm.
So is that doable for everybody? Todd, are you still available on the 29th?
Yeah, what time are we thinking, John?
Well, however long we spend it, if we start at 8 o'clock at 65 School Street, I don't think that'll take very long. We could probably be there by 8:30, 8:45.
Okay, yeah, it should be okay.
Okay, good.
So I did have one question about the proprietary aspects of the system. With the design that DeSelm Burke provided, did that show this? Did that include the proprietary system, or were there modifications made to the design subsequent to, I guess, you folks taking over as the lead engineer on the project?
It was incorporated into the project, so you can see on the screen that Steve happens to have up. These notations, CDS represents the proprietary. So I guess I will make the simplistic statement of it was like that when we got here. So
Okay.
we'll assume that he designed that into the project early on, which as he should have. So he checks
Okay.
the box.
Yeah, I'm just making sure we understand who the engineer of record is going to be for the project.
Right.
So that's going to be DeSelberg Solar, or is that?
Right. So DeSelberg Solar, again, are the record plans based on the Zoning Board of Appeals approval. We ultimately hope that this commission will agree with the design as proposed. If for some reason through this process we uncover something that is amiss or needs to be reconciled or rectified, we will do that for the project. We will correct it.
Okay.
So there will be, in short, some duality about the record engineers.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to be clear on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody, Ingrid, you're okay? A site walk on the 29th with additional information that we'll have?
Yes.
All right. And Steve, when do you're still around, are you not?
Not on the 29th, no.
Not on the 29th.
Nope. Hopefully I'll be leaving soon after the 15th, but I'm not sure how soon.
Uh, Soon after the 15th of January?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. But, well, there's nothing to be done then with that date.
Right.
So, other questions or comments from commissioners before we move to abutters and members of the public? Hearing none from the commissioners, are there members of the public that would like to ask a question or make a comment or express any concerns, either in favor or opposed? I hear none. So with that said, with the
Mr.
said, yes. you
I'm
got
sorry,
one.
Mr. Chairman, before you, I don't mean to interrupt and I apologize. Respecting that Steve is away for a lengthy gap in there, I think I heard him say he's gone after the 15th. Is it presumptuous and too aggressive to try to do the site walk this week before he leaves?
Phil, I'm not sure if I'm going to be COVID positive by the 15th, so that's an issue.
Negative.
Negative. You want to be negative, Steve.
Right.
Be careful what you wish for, Steve.
I don't mean to be aggressive.
That's
We value Steve's opinion, obviously in the process, and would love him to be part of it. But if he's not here, he's not here.
Steve, I don't know how you feel. I know that not everybody can make this Saturday. I can, but again, without knowing, and I think what we heard before, Hans was not available this Saturday, Ingrid's not available this Saturday.
And I'm not either, John.
What's that?
I said I wasn't planning on it because we went to the 29th.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right. So I think we're, yeah, I applaud you, Phil, for saying that. And we also depend upon Steve's insight. And it might be appropriate if you just, Steve, if you took a, well, again, I don't know if you're going to be negative or positive, but it would certainly be helpful if you saw the site.
Well, I've seen the site. I remember the site very well because we've done some work next door on another site, literally next door to that site, just to the south and east, if you remember. And I
remember well.
Yeah, and I have been on this site a couple of times. And if I am negative on Saturday, I may just take a walk over there. Phil, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Just
Actually, sorry to butt in. This is Joe Tamposi, the property owner. We would just need to have some notice. We do have tenants who live in the house. So, we can't have anyone come on the property unless, we have notice prior. So we would just need prior notice before you go on the property.
Understood. I'm happy to do it. So let me just take a test on Friday morning and see how I'm doing. How's that?
Yes, and Joe, what's the best way for Steve to contact? Is it you or Phil, or how should he go about making contact if he can do Saturday?
That could go through. That could go either through Phil or me. Phil can pass Steve my contact information. I just don't want to send it out publicly.
Sure, that's fine.
That's fine.
We'll coordinate. And Joe is correct to have corrected me. I should have assumed we had to do notification to the current residents. So Steve, if things change and you can make it work, let me know and we'll do the coordination. If not, we'll do the site walk, of course, on the 29th, and we'll circle the wagons as necessary either way.
Okay, happy to try it. Okay.
Good. Then with the assent of the applicant, that we will continue this until the public hearing on January 29th, Saturday morning at approximately 8:45. All right?
Correct.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much, all.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, do we have to, did you make a motion to continue this public hearing to a date certain in the future, independent of the site walk?
No, the site walk is a public hearing. So yes, it wasn't phrased as a motion. It was just a statement that we have your assent to continue it.
Okay.
Now, if we didn't have your assent, then we'd have to make it as a motion. But with your assent, we can just continue the public hearing.
You got it. So I apologize. Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, next on the agenda is, this is information only, but light pollution issues. And I think, do we have Gary and Professor Lowenthal? I can't see you on the screen, but I wonder if you're there. Gary, you are there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, and Professor James Lowenthal. So thank you both for joining us.
Also here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I am the advocacy director for the Neponset River Watershed Association. Light pollution and electronic billboards, more specifically, are a new issue for us. So I'm definitely not the expert, but I did try to share some of my research and some of the information I got from Professor Lowenthal, sort of about the impact of light pollution, particularly at night, on some of the interests of the Wetlands Protection Act, namely fisheries and wildlife habitat. And if you have specific questions, I'm happy to provide additional information. I don't have a presentation. I've been laid up with COVID for the last week.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But again, Professor Lowenthal is certainly the expert on these matters.
All right, well, for the public's benefit, this was put on the agenda because we've had a number of questions and some complaints come into us. And we do anticipate some issues coming in before the commission within the next few months. So we all thought it would be a good idea to just have a general discussion. As it relates to the first question we had, is it jurisdictional for us? And initially we reached out to DEP folks and just said, what's your take on the jurisdiction? And the simple answer we got back was that we have jurisdiction over the wildlife habitat, although the statute doesn't exactly address jurisdiction over wildlife, but most definitely wildlife habitat. So we're trying to figure out what is the connection between wildlife habitat and wildlife, and whether or not light impacts one or both or either. And so it's just sort of a general discussion so that we know what is within the purview of our control and what is not. So I think we have to, I guess the first step is to make sure that we can make a connection between an impact on wildlife and an impact on wildlife habitat. And I don't know if that's kind of a general vague question, but I don't know if you, Kerry, or you, Professor, could weigh in on that and kind of give us some guidance.
From an advocacy perspective, I would certainly say that by creating additional light pollution in a habitat, you are changing that habitat, and therefore you're impacting the habitat, which in turn affects the wildlife that live there. The question of whether when a project becomes jurisdictional is more of a legal question, which I can give some more thought to. And if Professor Lowenthal has anything to add, by all means.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I also want to point out that we have another expert on the call here, Kelly Beatty, who may wish to weigh in as well. By way of introduction, I'm professor of astronomy at Smith College in Northampton, where I'm sitting right now. I am the president of the Massachusetts chapter of the International Dark Sky Association. Their website is darksky.org. The International Dark Sky Association, IDA, is the major international go-to organization that protects the night sky and the nighttime environment from light pollution, and advocates at local through international levels for good, high quality, carefully designed, well-controlled outdoor lighting and the regulations that lead to it to protect the nighttime environment so that we minimize the negative effects on humans, on wildlife, and on the night sky. So we have a very active Massachusetts chapter, which I lead. Kelly Beatty is the communications director. He's also on the board of directors, or recent has been, of IDA International. We have a lot of related experience here in Massachusetts. This particular issue of the jurisdiction of conservation commissions under the Wetlands Protection Act, I don't have a clear answer to. The usual way that towns protect their nighttime environment is through zoning bylaws. Milton has zoning bylaws that that pertain specifically to light pollution. They're not very extensive. They don't refer explicitly to wildlife in any way. They basically say, keep the light on your own property. And that's good common sense. There are plenty of holes in it, and it should be updated, but one certainly could fall back on it in a case of a conscom jurisdictional question and say, look, the town bylaws say the light is not supposed to go beyond your property at a level of X, which is 0.1 foot candle. If you want to know more about that, we can talk about what the numbers mean. But basically, keep the light on your own property. Don't let it go past your property. If it goes off property onto any other property, whether it's wetlands or not, then supposedly that bylaw should be enforceable. But it doesn't specifically apply to conscom. What might apply to conscom, again, is when you asked what are the issues about habitat of light pollution and the effect on habitat, and the answer is they are profound. And there is a very large body of scientific evidence that is accruing quickly that speaks to the very serious negative, detrimental, harmful, often fatal consequence of light pollution on species from migrating birds to mammals to fish to amphibians to insects to coral. Everything is affected. Every species that has been studied is negatively affected by light pollution. I just want to read a couple of quotes from two major United Nations level efforts recent. One of them is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which issued a resolution number 84 just last September that says the impacts of artificial light at night affect many biological groups, both flora and fauna, vertebrate and non-vertebrate. And they point out a large proportion of animals live partially or exclusively at night, and a daily period of darkness is essential for all living organisms to alternate periods of rest and activity. And they make 8 recommendations, including avoid overlighting, switch off lights in the middle of the night, avoid upward lighting, avoid any illumination of a natural environment, limit the risk of glare for nocturnal species, minimize blue light. The second United Nations level document is called Dark and Quiet Skies, and I'm a co-author. This was commissioned by a United Nations committee, and the report pointed out, the bioenvironment report pointed out, artificial light at night can have significant effects on organisms and reduce the resilience of populations. And it gives lots of details on and extensive references on everything from aquatic organisms to birds to insects to mammals. And they make 13 recommendations, including avoid unnecessary illumination, use lighting controls, for example, dimmers and timers, avoid glare and light trespass where the light goes off your property, and minimize blue light because blue light is the worst for humans and all species. So to summarize, nighttime is a habitat. It is an essential habitat for not just nocturnal, but also diurnal species. All species need darkness at night to thrive. And when we ruin the darkness at night, we are ruining the habitat for all species, and all species suffer. So I'll pause here and see if there are particular questions that I can address, or see if Kelly wants to weigh in.
Yeah, we'd like to get some data on that. If you could forward the resolution 84 and then the UN committee report that you co-authored, if you could email that. I think you and I have been on the same email chain with Kerry, and I can distribute it to the other members of the commission. But that's really important to us. I mean, we've got some pretty significant species in the area that we had a representative from the Coastal Zone Management come into our commission meeting some years ago and told us that the largest spawning ground for Arthur, what's it's not the smelt is right at the, like we call it 2 Adams Street. It's right near the Adams Street Bridge on the Neponset River. It's the largest in New England for smelt. And that's something that we need to protect. And so light on the Neponset is a significant issue to us. And we need to make that connection between an impact on the habitat and the impact on the fish, or maybe we can reverse it and sort of confer jurisdiction on ourselves that if something's affecting the habitat and therefore affecting the smelt, then we need to take some corrective action. And so we need to be able to have scientific data to make that connection. And you've said something, I always call it the circadian cycle. And I don't know if that's the right term, but it seems like everybody has the need to alternate waking hours and sleeping hours and night and day, and light is a significant part of that. So we just need a scientific basis upon which we can ground some rules and regulations. And it may require new regulations. I don't know. But I think within the purview of our current authority, I think we have enough grounds to take action if there is a demonstrable impact upon wildlife habitat.
I am more than happy to provide those documents and to carry on a conversation about anything else you want to know about it, including more details on the science. I'm happy to put you in touch with biologists, including here in Massachusetts, who are experts. It's a big field. There are scientific journals that are devoted to so-called chronobiology, the biology of circadian rhythms and how light affects those circadian rhythms and the importance of them for the health and well-being of all creatures. There are many conferences, several a year, devoted to that issue. There are departments here in Massachusetts at universities and colleges where there are experts. I have colleagues here at Smith who are experts on exactly that issue. So there's a lot of scientific support for it.
That's great. Kelly, did you have some comments or insight that you could share with us?
I only, by the way, I'm Kelly Beatty. I live in Chelmsford. I'm also associated with the Massachusetts chapter of the IDA. And I want to point out that, you know, if you were looking for a sort of framework for gauging your decisions, one metric that you can bank on is something called lighting zones, which go from 0 to 5. And these are recognized by regulatory bodies, and in particular, the Illuminating Engineering Society, even MassDOT understands what lighting zones are. And these are a gauge of how sensitive that area is to, thank you, James. There you see them in front of you. And so these are, for example, I'll give you a case that's close to home for you. MassDOT within the last couple of years has decided to redo the street lighting at the intersection of Interstate 93 and State Route 24, going abutting the Blue Hills Reservation. And we were able to convince MassDOT that a lot of the Blue Hills Reservation abutting the roadbed was lighting zone 0, and therefore required and demanded the highest level of environmental protection. And I think this simple scale, which is widely recognized, is something that you can adopt as you go forward, looking at the sensitivity of particular areas within Milton to light pollution, as James was pointing out, even in the absence of local regulation that specifically addresses habitable zones. These lighting zones are a good first step.
All right, and these are EMC guidelines.
This document is a guideline produced by the International Dark Sky Association specifically for one problem in light pollution, which is LED signs, which is what they mean when they say electronic message centers. That's just a fancy name for, the LED signs that we see cropping up all over the place. And Carrie mentioned in particular that Milton had some possible, some proposals pending perhaps for electronic LED signs, which is why I pulled this up in preparation. The IDA has come up with these guidelines for how to minimize the negative effects of LED signs using the lighting zones that Kelly introduced.
Right, and let me just jump in here. Let's say you have a proposal come forward for an illuminating sign that abuts an environmentally sensitive area. You're entirely within your right, and it's probably incumbent on you to ask the petitioner to provide for you literally a light map. How much light from their project will fall on a given area, square meter or whatever it might be, in terms of distance and proximity from the street light or the billboard or whatever it might be. These are commonly produced by lighting engineers. The petitioner of whatever the project is ought to be prepared to pay for and supply that kind of lighting map, and that will give you an indication of how much light is falling on the property. It's not enough to say, for example, well, our billboard will be, X brightness. The unit for that actually is called a nit, N-I-T. Because billboards in particular, because they are designed to be seen from the widest possible angle with respect to the billboard itself, they cast light in a vast part of the of the sphere of the area around them, and so they really can't be shielded. And so if it's near an environmentally sensitive area, light from that billboard is going to fall on the habitat, whatever it might be, or the residential area, whatever the area of concern might be. And so the petitioner ought to be asked or challenged to provide lighting maps that demonstrate how much light is going to be falling based on what they're trying to do.
This has been very helpful, certainly to me. So I am very grateful that three of you took time to give us your insight and guidance. Are there some questions from the commission members? Arthur.
John, thank you. I also want to echo your thanks to Carrie, James, and Kelly for this very insightful information as we begin to take a thorough look at this important matter. And if you are aware of, in addition to the literature that you're going to provide for a conversation with John, if you are aware of any communities that have exemplar bylaws or other guidelines with respect to such lighting, that would be very helpful to know as well. I had a specific question for Carrie, and you may want to refer us to someone else within the Neponset watershed staffing. Do you know if, as along Milton Hill, where DCR has a right of way, there is an extension of that right of way along the Neponset River in the area that we've been discussing?
Is there an extension of the right of way?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So
okay.
The proposal that I have seen does not touch on any such property, but we can take a closer look at that with GIS.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
And I know we have the park very close by, and the ramp down to the Neponset River, et cetera.
And it's right in the ACEC. Yeah.
And Mr. Doyle, if I can just reply to your question, we are familiar with many other towns in Massachusetts and elsewhere in the U.S. and abroad that have regulations against outdoor lighting or about outdoor lighting to try to protect the nighttime environment. Some are more successful than others. We can certainly point you to some model bylaws here in Massachusetts. It would help us send you the most useful information if you could tell us what you anticipate are the most likely problems. Is it indeed mostly illuminated signs, LED billboards, or is it private projects, residential projects, commercial projects, municipal issues? Is there anything in particular you see coming down the pipeline that is especially of interest?
I think the first point is probably the most immediate with respect to the petitioner's interest in the billboard. But I think there are other situations so that the more generic the information is, the more we can cover the waterfront, so to speak, the better. So any communities that you can identify, we can do the research and find out what they have as bylaws. But if you have examples of documentation, all of that would be most welcome, because it would inform all of the involved parties in ways that could be very, very constructive and beneficial.
Great, thank you, and we're happy to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, one thing I can add to that, James, and that is over the last, I don't know, 30 years or so, we've had very cooperative applicants. I can think of some colleges and schools here in Milton that have applied for buildings and parking lots, and we've asked them to have, downward facing lights, and they've been very cooperative. So it's never become a jurisdictional issue for us. I know of late, the street lighting on a new project in Milton, the Pulte home development, which I was not a part of, but I believe that lighting was addressed in that, and it was done on sort of on a cooperative basis. And we would hope to continue on that cooperative basis, but the issue came up, do we have jurisdiction if it's needed? So thus far, we've been lucky, but we just want to be prepared that if it becomes an issue or if it becomes controversial, that we want to make sure that we have the jurisdiction to take appropriate remedial action. So we thank you for that. Any other thoughts or questions from commissioners or members of the public?
John, this is Steve. I have a question regarding measurement. And back in 1975, I was working in sugar beet fields with a J16 photometer. Do Mr. Lowenthal and Mr. Beatty recognize that?
I'm afraid not.
That particular machine? It basically measured radiation. We were doing 616 nanometer lighting in a sugar beet field to increase the root weight and the sucrose concentration of sugar beets, and there's a patent on it, believe it or not. But in any case, I did a little bit of work earlier this week looking at meters. Are there any low-cost meters? I know there's no apps on cell phones or anything yet because of the, let's just say the geometry of what you need to do. But are there any low-cost meters available?
Yes. There are actually apps on the phone, but they don't work well, so I don't recommend them, especially for low light levels that we're talking about it for nighttime environments. There are two different kinds of measurement that you might be interested in. One of them is how much light is falling from a light source onto your hand or a fence or a tree or a plant or the roadway. And that you measure with a light meter. You're measuring a quantity called illuminance. And the light meters that do that are cheaper. I would say minimum $100. You might spend up to $1,000, but something on the $100 range will get you a decent measurement. The other measurement that is likely to be of interest is how intense the light source itself is, which is something we call not illuminance, but luminance. And that needs a fancier piece of equipment, upwards of $1,000. And then you can get even fancier and measure the spectrum as well, which is going to be pricier yet.
Right, which just to jump in, when someone is coming before you to, let's say, provide an illuminated billboard, an internally illuminated light source, then this luminance function becomes critically important, because you essentially are asking how much light is emitted by this billboard per square area, whatever it might be, times however big the billboard is, right? If it's just a, if it's the size of a card table versus the side of an 18-wheeler truck, 20 by 40 feet, a lot of billboards are huge in size. That creates a tremendous amount of light being inserted into the environment. Again, this luminance value is commonly, in terms of illuminated signs, is commonly called a nit. I think it's candela per meter squared, James, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's a number they ought to be prepared to deliver to you, right out of the gate. And from that, you won't need a meter. You're just asking the petitioner to provide that information for you.
Thank you very much. I should add that I was working for a company that owned Sylvania Lighting at the time, by the way. You may
Maybe you still
recognize
get a
that.
deal.
What's that? Yes,
You
exactly.
get a deal on one. That's good. All right. Do we have any other questions or comments from commissioners or members of the public? Well, we thank you very much. Very sincere thanks. It's been very helpful to us, and we're grateful.
And we hope, Carrie, that you recover fully and quickly.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's
for
everywhere right
everybody
now.
together to be with us. We appreciate it very much.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Good night, all.
Say hello to Ian.
Good night. Thank you.
So that was number 4 on the agenda. Number 5 is additional business. And I know we have some folks in the that I'm looking on the screen, and I'm hoping we didn't miss anybody or anything. They may be just participants, and if so, then we'll continue. But if somebody wants to speak up and say, "Hey, you missed something," please say so or say something. Under additional business, Steve, do you have a list?
Short list, very short list. Very simply, number 1 is, you probably saw the detail, but 107 to 111 Highland Street. Everybody should know that the DEP affirmed both the ORAD, Order of Resource Area Delineation, and the RDA, the Request for Determination of Applicability for some test pits on that site. And that was late December that the DEP affirmed the Conservation Commission's decisions on both of those. We don't know yet whether they are going to be appealed further or not just yet.
So no change to the resource area as approved by the commission.
That is correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Which is a wonderful thing for the commission. Secondly, and lastly for me, the MWRA Section 22, they did some work checking on the structure of some pipes and some infrastructure on holding up some water pipes going through the Neponset River watershed area. And their report, the end of 2021, the growth season, turns out that things are growing very, very well. Their work to revegetate the area that they did some testing in is doing very well. They're at 75% regrowth, which is wonderful. So that work was done right in the area, John, just upstream from you.
Yes, I know. That's good. If I can add something to the first point, in addition to the superseding the 2 orders of DEP, they both came down, they're dated December 29th, and you should have those. I think Kathy distributed them. If you don't have them, I can certainly forward them on to you. But they could just reiterate what Steve said, that our decision and orders were approved or confirmed. But in addition to that, you should know that there's also a lawsuit against us, which is the appropriate vehicle for appealing a decision. But under the town bylaw, which part of our order was based upon, they don't have the option of going to the DEP for an appeal and the issuance of a superseding order. Rather, the vehicle for appeal is a civil action in the Superior Court. So the same parties, Ms. Bacardi, one of the neighbors, has instituted an action against the Conservation Commission. We're being defended by Kevin Freytag and the folks in the town council's office. And that we're in the midst of right now preparing our record appendix. It's essentially operating as an appeal of an administrative order, but it is appropriately in the Superior Court. That's the only vehicle they have for review. I trust that the Superior Court will be given as part of the record appendix the two superseding orders by DEP, and that will, I think, lend some credence to the decisions that we made, but that will have to wait. That'll be seen. But we're underway on the Superior Court side of this. And what else do we have? Steve, anything from you?
No, not at all.
We have, what else? We do have some other issues. Arthur, do you have any additional orders of additional business?
Mr. Chairman, might we put on the agenda for the meeting on the 29th, 1625 Canton Avenue?
Yes. And that is something that will be appropriate for discussion. You remember 1625 became a little confused because we actually issued an order of conditions to build the house. This is the net zero house at the end of Carberry Lane. And it became a little problematic because DEP issued a comment saying that it has to be a buildable lot prior to 1996 under the Rivers Protection Act in order to be exempt from the no build zone within the inner riparian zone, which is the first 100 feet. And this is an area of Balster Brook that is it's presumptively a perennial stream. It's on the USGS map as such. And that really trumps stream stats, which is another alternative mechanism for deciding whether something is perennial or intermittent. So it is presumptively perennial until proven otherwise. So we then had a discussion after the issuance of our order with Hale Smith and his wife, and their engineer is Brian Donahue. And we've kind of gone back and forth as to whether or not their property was exempt or not. Because the question in my mind was, well, is it buildable, or was it buildable as a lot prior to 1996? So I ended up talking to town council and asked town council to give us an opinion. And at the same time in that discussion, Joe Prondak got involved, and I talked to Joe and asked him, do you know whether or not it was a buildable lot? And he indicated that when the Smith family purchased the land, there were actually two lots, which I did not know, but they had two lots. One they built their home on, and the other one is referred to as the hayfield. And that was the second lot that they seek to develop now. So it was a recorded lot, but Joe went back and looked at the original plot plan, and it says not buildable. And the reason it was not buildable was because it did not have sufficient frontage. So as a consequence, I fed all that information back to Kevin Freytag and town council, and Karis North, who is the attorney that does work for the town in the environmental arena, did give us an opinion. And I will forward that opinion to everybody. But in it, she quotes a DEP case. And the opinion in that case, that DEP case involving a different town, said essentially that to be a buildable lot, it has to be allowable under other municipal laws. And in that case, very similar to our case, the petitioner had gone before the ZBA and asked for a variance because of lack of frontage. And Mr. and Mrs. Smith have done that in this case. They have gone to the ZBA. It's now pending before the ZBA, and I have no idea what the ZBA will do. But the opinion by Caris North to us, as you will see in the opinion letter that I send to you, she says that it is, quote, buildable to the extent that it is possible to build on the lot if given the variance. So as a consequence, the opinion suggests to me that it does qualify for the exemption under the Rivers Protection Act. And if that exemption applies, then they can build something, as we allowed, within the 100-foot inner riparian zone. And I'm sure you won't recall this, but if you go back and look at the plan, they're about 18 feet inside the inner riparian zone. So it would be, I guess, 82 feet from the river. But under the Rivers Protection Act, post 1996, it would not be buildable. But if it's a buildable lot prior to 1996, it is buildable. So we're going to have to confront that because they have asked us to grant the exemption. And it is, as I understand the DEP communication, because we've been in full communication with DEP on this, they have taken the position that, well, if we approve it, then it's okay. So we'll be able to take a look at that on the 29th. We'll put that on the agenda. And in the meantime, I will send you the Caris North opinion letter. You have to read it carefully and slowly because it's not quite, I'm not sure if I've been clear, but it's not as clear as you might want it to be. And I think, Steve, your reaction was, what?
Exactly. That was my reaction. What? I said that a couple of times. By the way, just a quick correction. That's actually 1632 Canton Ave.
Yes.
I believe their current home is at 1625 Canton Ave.
Okay. All right. It is a different law.
I believe so.
All right. So if I wasn't clear to you, then I guess maybe you'd agree with Steve. But I'll send out the opinion letter and we can address it at a public meeting on the 29th. We need to make sure that it's on the agenda. And then we had one other issue that has come up under additional business, and that is not before us tonight, so it does not require a vote. But we did receive, and I say we, because I think Steve and I received communications from Bob Hannigan as it relates to, I think it's 152 Robin Street? It's right on the corner of Myers Lane.
I think it was 137.
137, it's right in the corner anyway. It's an empty lot.
37 Robbins.
What is it?
Actually.
37. All right, thanks, Chief.
37, thank you. Yep.
All right, and so the issue is that DEP suggested for other reasons, I guess, that the, I'm sorry, I said DEP, but somebody, maybe it was our own zoning board of building commissioner, had suggested that the footprint of the house be moved. So they have to move it closer to Balster Brook once again. And I think they are now inside the inner riparian zone. And I'm sorry, it is not inside the inner riparian zone, even though they moved whatever the frontage, whatever the distance moved is, it's around 20 feet, I think, but it's still outside of the inner riparian zone. So we don't have to have the same issue confronted that we do at 1632 Canton Avenue. So the only issue is whether or not it's a minor revision to the order of conditions. And if so, we can take a vote that it's minor. And if it's minor, then we can revise the order of conditions. If it's a major change or a significant change, then the applicant would have to refile a notice of intent and start the process all over again. So what I've asked Bob Hannigan to do is to draw another plan for us that actually shows us what the revision is. My gut reaction is it doesn't sound like a big deal because it stays outside of the inner riparian zone, and we avoid that whole issue of whether it was a buildable lot prior to 1996. It won't affect us. But we need that plan, so I'm anticipating that Bob Hannigan will provide that plan to us in sufficient time that we'll have it on the 29th. And then we can view that on the 29th and make a decision as to whether or not it indeed is a minor revision. And if it is, then we can amend the order of conditions. That clear?
Yes, except for John, I don't think it's Balster Brook. I'm pretty sure it's Trout Brook at that point.
Steve, I didn't hear.
Trout Brook.
Yes,
Trout.
I
Trout
said
Brook.
Balster, you are 100% correct. It is Trout Brook.
Right.
That's
I was
correct.
listening at least.
My mistake, thank you.
Sure.
All right, anybody have any questions on that? All right, it will be an issue on the agenda. It doesn't seem to be a big issue. And that's all I had for additional business, I think. Any other?
Yes, John, we have a vacancy on the commission.
Yes. Yes, indeed. But that is, I think we will, to my knowledge, we only have one applicant for that position, and that's Tom Palmer. And we did send out notification to the Justice and Equity Committee to make sure that they knew there was a vacancy. We've been monitoring, Arthur's been very good at monitoring the data bank that the town maintains to make sure that we had all possible applicants for it. And it's my understanding that Tom Palmer is the only one that is listed the Conservation Commission as the #1 priority. So I think it's now at this juncture is up to the select board to make a decision as to whether or not to appoint Tom or anyone else. And I don't think, Arthur, that we have to make a recommendation. We just have to alert the select board that we have a vacancy and we'd like it to be filled.
I think that's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, and I think it would also be appropriate for the commission to put Mr. Palmer forward for consideration by the select board, for the select board's vote. So that could be done by consensus of the Conservation Commission, but I think that would be an expectation of the select board.
Oh, well, if that's the expectation, that's fine with me, and I certainly support Tom. He certainly knows the business. He's been around a long time. He's a Milton resident, and he's invested in the protection of the environment. So I would certainly support that if we're looking for a consensus. I don't think we necessarily need a vote, but I don't know if anybody else any feelings, either pro or con, for Tom Palmer. How about this? Are there any objections? Well, I don't hear any, so I guess that's a consensus to endorse his candidacy for the select board and request his appointment.
I'll pass that forward, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. That's it on my list of additional business. Anybody else? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? And again, before we actually take that motion, but are there members of the public that would like to ask a question or make a comment or suggestion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Nobody wants to leave.
All right. I knew you'd come through.
I gotcha, Todd.
Welcome.
All right, thanks. I'll see you on the 29th. All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, all.